Okay, right now. Good morning once again. Honorable audience, distinguished guests, dear students, professors, representatives of non-governmental organization, mass media. It's a great honor to welcome you today at Moldova State University to this special event that is organized in partnership with American Council Romanian Office and with Conflict Prevention and Early Warning Center in our university. As the Republic of Moldova approaches a very crucial and decisive electoral moment, for us, this panel actually offers us the opportunity to reflect what is on stake, not only for the democratic trajectory of our country or Euro-Atlantic aspirations, but also for wider Black Sea region, for Europe and Transatlantic Community. We are privileged today to have with us the distinguished guests, experts and speakers who will guide us in insights to the discussions about the democratic future of our republic, about sovereignty, security issues, and of course, our country's place in a broader regional and international context. With those thoughts, I am pleased to invite Professor Dr. Igor Sharov, Director of Moldova State University, to deliver the welcome remarks and to open today's proceedings. Mr. Rector, the floor is yours, please.
Excelență, stimate domnule ambasador, stimate domnule profesor Iulian Chifu, stimate domnule Axelman, dragi colegi profesori, dragi studenți, stimați reprezentanți a societății civile, vă salut cu mult drag aici în Aula Regina Maria, care a devenit un simbol a Universității de Stat din Moldova. Universitatea de Stat din Moldova are onoarea să găzduiască un eveniment de asemenea amploare, cu atât mai mult să aibă ca invitați specialiști de un asemenea calibru. Este o posibilitate și pentru dumneavoastră, în primul rând pentru studenții la Facultatea de Relații Internaționale, Științe Politice și Administrative. Aș vrea să menționez rolul universităților. Rolul universităților este unul deosebit, în special când vorbim de o asemenea tematică. Astăzi nu vorbim de formațiuni politice, nu vorbim de anumiți actori, astăzi vorbim despre viitorul nostru și am să vă rog frumos să nu ezitați să dați întrebări în cadrul panelului discuții care va urma, care vă frământă pe dumneavoastră. Alegerile ziua din 28 septembrie este nu numai despre alegeri, este vorba despre viitorul nostru. A treia cale nu există. O lume care aduce ură, război, regim totalitar. Am trecut prin aceasta eu și generația de acum colegilor, profesorilor mei, credeți-mă, fiindcă membru Comisiei Regimului Totalitar Comunist de studiere, știu atrocitățile unui regim. Și a doua, o lume care aduce pace, prosperitate și un viitor, în primul rând, pentru dumneavoastră. Alegerile din 28 sunt importante și dintr-o perspectivă, unde ne vom trezi noi pe data de 29. Oricum, viața va urma înainte. Dar atunci când vorbești de mediul academic, pentru mine personal, educarea unui spirit critic la studenți, nu impunerea unui punct de vedere, este una foarte importantă. Profitați de această posibilitate, acordați întrebările care vă stau dumneavoastră și nu anume din aceste considerente, această întâlnire are loc pe platforma Facultății de Relații Internaționale, Științe Politice și Administrative. Dacă observați, noi oferim la universitate multiple oportunități. Săptămâna trecută a fost unul dintre cei mai cunoscuți experți în domeniul diplomației digitale, Corneliu Biola, domnul Valentin Nomescu de la Universitatea din Cluj, specialiști în materie. În aceste momente, la Facultatea de Jurnalism, specialiști din jurnalism din Germania, din România, vin cu lecții și împărtășesc opiniile sale vis-a-vis de un subiect sau altul. Universitatea este un focar al ideilor. Universitatea este universitatea oamenilor liberi și în aceste cuvinte, în momentele cruciale, după mine, rolul lumii academice este unul deosebit, dar astăzi nu este ziua mea, deci am să fiu foarte scurt, sper de acum nu aluge cu cuvântul meu introductiv. Acordați întrebări, declar deschis această sesiune și vreau încă o dată să-i mulțumesc domnului excelență sale, domnul ambasador și în special domnului profesor Iulian Chifu, pe care dumneavoastră îl cunoașteți deja pe platforma al discuțiilor la Facultatea de Relații Internaționale, Științe Politice și Administrative, pentru acest efort, pentru organizare și să fie într-un ceas bun. Vă mulțumesc!
Thank you very much, Mr. Rector, for your remarks and your warming remarks in address of our faculty and speciality of international relations that is so important in nowadays conditions. And right now, with great honor and privilege, I will offer the floor to the Mr. Șerban, Senior Consultant at the Atlantic Council Romanian Office. Please, Mr. Șerban.
Thank you. Domnule Rector Igor Sharov, Ambassador John Herbst, Professor Iulian Chifu, ladies and gentlemen, honorable audience. On behalf of the Atlantic Council Romania and our partners, the Atlantic Council Eurasia Center, the Conflict Prevention and Early Warning Center, and the State University of Moldova, I'm honored to welcome you and to be here at today's public event entitled The 2025 Elections in the Republic of Moldova, Implications for the Black Sea Region, Europe, and Transatlantic Community. First, let me extend my gratitude to Rector Igor Sharov and the State University of Moldova for graciously hosting us. Your university has long been a forum for thoughtful dialogue and civic engagement, and we are privileged to gather here. I also want to thank Ambassador John Herbst and Dr. Iulian Chifu for lending their deep expertise and for their decades of service to transatlantic security and democratic development. The Republic of Moldova stands at an important crossroads. Over the coming months, Moldovan citizens will make choices that will not only shape their country's democratic trajectory and European and Euro-Atlantic aspirations, but will reverberate across the Black Sea region and within the transatlantic community. These elections really matter because their outcome will influence the Republic of Moldova's sovereignty and security, and under increasing external pressure, that will be critical. As these elections will impact and shape the country's relationship with its neighbors and partners, for those of us across the Atlantic and across the Prut River, the Republic of Moldova's path is more than a regional question. It is a test of our collective commitment to Europe that is whole, free, and at peace. Today's dialogue sends a clear signal. Moldova has friends that are paying attention. They care deeply about its future, and they remain committed to your country's democratic journey. This conversation also underscores a critical point. The future is not predetermined. It will be written by the choices that you make, by the integrity of the electoral process, and by the continued engagement of civil society, journalists, and students, all of you here today. Your presence reminds us that democracy is strengthened not just by votes, but by informed debate, civic responsibility, and the courage and duty to participate. We hope today's panel will provide valuable insights into domestic and international stakes of the elections, offer a frank assessment of the challenges ahead, and most importantly, inspire all of us to think creatively about how to support the Republic of Moldova's stability, sovereignty, and prosperity. Thank you once again for joining us today. I encourage all of you to listen, engage, but also to ask bold questions. I look forward to the discussion and working together to ensure that this country's democratic future remains bright and that its voice continues to matter on the European and transatlantic stage. Now it's my pleasure to hand the floor over to Ambassador John Herbst. Ambassador Herbst is a former U.S. diplomat with over 3 decades of service. He served as U.S. Ambassador to Uzbekistan from 2000 to 2003 and to Ukraine from 2003 to 2006, where he played a pivotal role during the Orange Revolution and in strengthening U.S.-Ukraine relations. He has also held senior positions, including coordinator for reconstruction and stabilization at the U.S. State Department, overseeing U.S. efforts to support societies facing conflict and instability. Currently, Ambassador Herbst serves as the Senior Director of the Atlantic Council's Eurasia Center, founded in 2009, where he provides thought leadership on security, diplomacy, and political developments across Eurasia. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador John Herbst for his keynote address.
Alex, thank you, and it's an honor and a pleasure to be here. Your parliamentary elections, right, which are coming up very soon, are first and foremost critical for yourselves. It's really not an exaggeration to say that your future is on the ballot. Over the past 5 or 6 years, Moldova has taken very clear steps towards Europe, towards a free society, towards a prosperous society. The one very clear piece of evidence for that, of course, is visa-free travel to the EU and a growing economic relationship with the EU. And you are on the fast track to EU membership, as is Ukraine. As notably is not on the fast track to EU membership, Georgia, which has been moving in exactly the wrong direction for the past several years, and especially the last year or two. You have a problem. In Moldova, there are still institutions, there are customs, there are instincts that reflect your Soviet past. These are problems. They're not insurmountable. In fact, I would argue that they are relatively easily surmountable were it not for one unpleasant external factor. Sadly, for its own people and for the peoples of neighboring countries, the Kremlin decided approximately 17 or 18 years ago, we can argue about the exact date, that freedom was not in its future. In the 90s, there were problems in post-Soviet Russia, but the country was moving more or less in terms of domestic and foreign policy in the right direction. Notice I say more or less, and I'll come back to that to talk about the less in a minute. But then you can date this to the Orange Revolution in Ukraine, when I was serving at the U.S. Embassy. You can date this to Putin's famous or infamous speech at the Munich Security Conference in February of 2007. Moscow policy took a clear turn back to the past, back to authoritarianism, back towards a militaristic, aggressive national security policy. And you are one of the objects, you, Moldova, are one of the objects of that national security policy. And you are lucky that you do not share a border with Russia, an unfortunate circumstance which has had catastrophic consequences for Ukraine, and for that matter, for Georgia. But you are close enough. And Putin has made very clear in recent years that his large foreign policy objective is at a minimum to restore Moscow's influence across the entire space occupied by the former Soviet Union, which includes over a dozen independent nations. Putin's objectives also include restoring substantial, if not complete, influence to the nations that were once part of the Soviet Empire, in other words, the nations of the former not mourned Warsaw Pact. A truly aggressive foreign policy, which Putin has pursued by war in Georgia and in Ukraine, and by many forms of intimidation in other places, including in Moldova. And I'm sure everyone in this room is familiar with the great Moldovan banking scandal of the last decade, which was a clear function of the Russian use of your banks for money laundering purposes. So you are facing, and you have faced actually, over the past, more than half a decade, as reform forces led by President Sandu and her party have become, ruling party in the country, and begun decisively orienting your policy towards Europe. Again, towards freedom, towards prosperity, and towards actual independence. Because what Mr. Putin has in mind for you is not independence. This election, again, is a great test of Moldovan society. Moscow has been using financing of opposition figures in this country to push Moldova back towards Moscow's control. They've been using a sophisticated disinformation campaign. They've been helped in that by their Chinese partners. We all remember the serious and nasty impact that TikTok had on the elections in Romania last year. We are seeing a repeat of that, or rather we're seeing a repeated effort using TikTok here in Moldova. And since you're all the age of my oldest grandchildren, you are undoubtedly very familiar and comfortable on TikTok. I do hope you're aware of the use of TikTok as a political instrument to undermine Moldovan sovereignty. It's notable, however, important, however, that Russian efforts are far from foolproof, are far from successful. The same playbook that Putin is using as your elections approach this year, he used last year in your presidential elections. And we all know that Maya Sandu had a resounding victory last year. We also know that the polls, proxy, leading up to this year's election are not as rosy as they were in the run-up to the presidential election last year. Although, point of fact, the polls a year ago were not wonderful either. And the result was notably better than the polls were before. And I'll return to that theme in a minute. I want to talk, though, first about the question I was asked to address when I was invited to speak here, which is the dangers of Kremlin's success in your election. Obvious for you, it would be not quite a catastrophe, but a large step in the direction of tragedy. I say that because even if the forces that the Kremlin is financing in a major way were to win the parliamentary elections, and by win I mean make it impossible for PAS to be the decisive influence in your parliament. Were that to happen, that means you suddenly have a major force blocking future progress in Moldova, whether it's in domestic policy or, very important, relating to domestic policy, progress by Moldova towards joining the EU, Because you've got a wide open door right now in Brussels. And it would be truly unfortunate if you were not able to walk through that door. And the different parties that Moscow is financing want to make sure you don't walk through that door, even if some of their public rhetoric suggests that they kind of like the EU. But were a bad result in the upcoming election to be followed by a bad result in presidential elections, then you have gone back to the past. You had many years with the President Voronin, and I've actually met him. He's not an unpleasant man. But I think it's safe to say that Moldova does not need someone like Voronin exercising major influence in the country. And since most of the people in this room are under 25 years of age, it's really you who have a stake in this. This is your future. While it would be a disaster for Moldova if political control returned to people who are fond of the Soviet past, it would also be very dangerous for your immediate neighbors. First and foremost for Ukraine. You're all very much aware of Putin's large invasion of Ukraine. You're also aware that since the large invasion began, at least in the first half a year after it, there were some unsuccessful efforts by the Kremlin to be able to reinforce Russia's position in Transnistria, to put additional pressure on Ukraine. And those efforts failed in very public ways that embarrassed, I'm happy to say, Mr. Rogozin. So you've played, in effect, a critical role in limiting Moscow's aggression in Ukraine. And that could change overnight if suddenly the power in Chișinău was yielded by those who want to accommodate Russian aggression. But it would also be dangerous for Romania, for other neighboring countries, for Europe overall, because this would be seen as a harbinger of growing Kremlin influence. And Putin's interest is not just to restore Moscow's control over the former Soviet states and over the former Warsaw Pact states. He wants to weaken NATO. He wants to weaken the EU. So this development here would be a clear negative for NATO, the EU, that includes the United States. I think you know that Russia's objective in Ukraine is to establish political control over the country. There are naive people in the West who think that Putin would settle for some form of at least de facto recognition of his control over the territory in Ukraine he currently occupies. But that's not true. Putin wants all of what he calls Novorossiya, which extends certainly to Odessa, but it also includes the entire Ukrainian Black Sea coast, which means he wants a land bridge to Moldova, to Transnistria, and that would be a disaster for you. And again, were he able to count on a malleable government here in Chișinău, it would make it easier for him to achieve that objective and to push you forcefully back under Moscow's control, something you don't want. So the stakes in your election are very high. I paid reasonably close attention to the polls, which again are not wonderful. But I've been in Chișinău since Monday. I've had an opportunity to talk to various people, including in your government. And I have a sense, now notice that noun, sense. This is not something I could prove, but I have a sense of confidence on the part of the reform actors in Moldova that will see an outcome later this month that will not be much different from the outcome a year ago. We all know that the good guys won a year ago because the Moldovan diaspora, which is doing pretty well in the West, in Europe, in the United States, came in very strong, overwhelmingly, for reform. I believe their instincts have not changed, that they've only strengthened. I believe they're going to weigh in hard on this election, and that will play an important role in an eventual victory. But one last point, because I served at the US Embassy in Kyiv during the Orange Revolution, and the Russian media like to say that the US manipulated that election to achieve the victory of their candidate. And I would put that entire sentence in quotation marks, meaning that it's not an accurate description of what we were doing. My view on your election today, like my view on the Ukrainian presidential election in 2004, was that we wanted to see a free and fair election, and we would welcome the winner of that free and fair election. So that means if it were demonstrated that the parties of the past were to win this upcoming election fairly, we would have to acknowledge that and be willing to talk to them, treat them as legitimate. Because you don't get to a free society, you don't get to the future, so to speak, by manipulating the present in ways that are, frankly, not honest and ultimately not moral. But I say this confident in how the election will turn out, because again, there is a reform impulse in Moldova, which again, the young in particular represent, that will not be denied. So I wish you well in your elections. I wish you well beyond your elections. And I expect to be back in Moldova at some point in the next 6 or 8 months to see things moving in the right direction. Thank you for your time.
Once again, thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your insightful remarks. It is my privilege right now to pass the floor to our distinguished panelists. Last but not least, Professor Dr. Iulian Chifu, a founder and president on the Conflict Prevention Early Warning Center in Bucharest, the eminent expert in the domain of security issues, strategic affairs, but I think it's better to say very good friend of our faculty, and the floor is yours, Dr. Professor Chifu, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Rector Sharov. Thank you very much, Ambassador John Herbst, Alex Sharban, my very good friend. I'm very happy that we could have today here Ambassador John Herbst, because he is in the best position of telling you how the US is looking at the situation in the region, how it is approaching the evolution of the world as of today, and how important is nowadays Republic of Moldova in its choice that it's going to do on the 28th of September. It is about a geopolitical orientation. It is about avoiding to put a Russian, pro-Russian enclave on the back of Ukraine and at the borders of EU-US states. If you want to look at the stakes, at the enjeu, if you want, look at the money that is discovered by your own institutions that is used to finance certain parties, to buy votes, and ultimately to alterate the free and fair elections. Integrity of the elections is the first concern of all democratic countries. Romania, my own country, passes via such an episode, and I'm quite sure that you have followed 2 days ago the announcement of the General Prosecutor Office, who sent in court the perpetrators who use multiple instruments in order to derail the elections, and actually Russia to abduct the most important political position in the Romanian state, that of the presidential office. We didn't get that way. We succeed in anticipating that, and we had 3 months ago elections that put things in order. Now, the lessons learned from what happened in Republic of Moldova for the referendum plus presidential elections, the lessons learned from our own presidential plus parliamentarian elections are very well known. And as you know, we, the democratic countries, we are supporting each other. There is a full-fledged exchange of intel, support between institutions, so that the lessons learned in every Russian involvement in Western democratic elections could be turned the other way around by Republic of Moldova institutions, and that the will of the public is that expressed in the polls. As you have seen, we are living a full spectrum warfare against democratic states. It doesn't happen only in the Republic of Moldova or Romania, in all democratic states. It happens through a lot of means that are combined and planned in order to achieve a dramatic change and altering of the will of the people. It is what is happening here in Chișinău as well. You have all the help that democratic European states, the US, can provide in order for you to have really the will of the people expressed in the polls. And yes, the orientation of the Republic of Moldova in the next elections is primarily very important. It is up to the voters in Republic of Moldova, but at the same time, yes, there is a very important involvement of foreign actors, especially Russia, in those elections. They also take profit on a succession of acts that the government has done. First, you need to do a deconstruction to rule away the dependency from political gas, political prices, altered goods that are given with, formally with no prices, but actually with a political price that is heavier than entering the market prices. It happens for Republic of Moldova. Fortunately, you do have alternatives. Fortunately, that dependency is no longer with us at a large respect. On another point, the second track is about reforms. Reforms are not easy. Reforms are coming with costs, are coming with people that are losing positions, money, relations. In some cases, even some who doesn't have something directly to do with the process. Unfortunately, those reforms are not lasting just one mandate. Nobody can do reforms in one mandate. Now, the path towards the European Union, support of the European Union on know-how, on the path of the reforms is very important. And that is helping Republic of Moldova to achieve also this part, which comes together with the reconstruction of democratic institutions, of market economy institutions in such a way that Republic of Moldova can take the best advantage of its own spirit, of its own people, of its own work, and that's where we are heading. Once again, that's the path that we should go. I will not buy from you much time, because actually the target was to have Ambassador Herbst with us and also to have a vivid debate, and I'm quite sure that you are going to be involved with questions, and we will try, and especially Ambassador Herbst is going to try to fill up the questions that you would have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kifo. And right now we pass into the very important part of our discussion, panel discussions. For us, very important, the voice of our young generation, persons that will take a decision in the 28th of September. And you are the persons that we think our future depends on. For our distinguished guests, I announce that in Aula are present representatives of non-governmental organizations of Republica Moldova, also mass media and students. And right now you will have the possibility to address the questions. I think that we may start, yes, with the panel discussions and questions from the audience. Please, dear students, colleagues, professors, representatives of non-governmental organizations, the floor is yours. We may start. I see already the hands, please.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests. Good afternoon, Mr. Rector, Ambassador John Herbst. We are very pleased to have you here today at our university. And my name is Kara Eugene. I'm the student of the second year of the Department of International Relations. So my question is to distinguished Ambassador John Herbst. So, Your Excellency, as a former ambassador to Ukraine, Ukraine has shown a great resilience under the diplomatic, military and cyber pressures from the Russia side. So, in your assessment, how might Moldova adapt this Ukrainian experience to strengthen and combat this Russian influence and to maybe to strengthen our security, our precious sovereignty, and foster our diplomatic or democratic reforms? So that's my question. Thank you.
Okay, very good question. Look, I think Moldova, again, certainly in the last 5, 6, 7 years under Sandu's influence, but even a little bit before that, has taken serious steps to strengthen its sovereignty. I mean, for example, prior to reform forces coming to power, you did have that banking scandal, and it was understood even then that Russian influence in your financial system was overwhelming and nasty, and steps began to be taken to deal with it. As were steps, again, predating reform governance in the country, steps taken to reduce Russian presence in your power ministries and your intelligence services and such. And all of those things, of course, have been done more thoroughly and energetically and successfully as reform governance began in this country. And it didn't require, I don't think, a great deal of persuasion here for people to recognize the value of, one, getting visa-free entry to the EU, and then becoming members of the EU. Even in Transnistria, people understood the advantage this could bring to them, despite a major, major Kremlin influence. So this is what has to happen. That processes that began years ago continue and are strengthened. In fact, I should mention one thing which I should have put into my set remarks. The U.S. has done a lot of excellent work here, going back a long time. Again, helping you deal with Russian penetration of your security services, Russian penetration of your financial system, and in recent years, massive Russian disinformation and use of financial incentives to subvert the will of your people in elections. I am delighted to tell you that those efforts have continued even with the new administration in the White House. Just as President Ivanishvili in Georgia was disappointed that the new administration has not embraced him and renounced former Russian policy, Washington policy in Georgia, we see the same instincts at play here in Moldova, and that's a positive.
Thank you very much. I announce you that you may put questions not only to His Excellency Ambassador, also for our panelists, Mr. Shirban or Mr. Kifo. Okay, we may continue, please. I see hand here from the non-governmental organization, please.
Hello, my name is Sofia Diaconu and I'm representing the Information and Documentation Center in Moldova. And my question is, Ambassador Herbst, as we approach Moldova's 2025 elections, the interplay between domestic democratic resilience and external security guarantees becomes critical not only for Chișinău, but overall for the Black Sea region and the Transatlantic Community. From your perspective, what concrete steps should Moldova's Western partners prioritize in the aftermath of these elections to ensure that the country's democratic trajectory remains credible and secure in the face of the continued Russian hybrid threats? Thank you.
Another excellent question. First, I think that the United States, and for that matter, NATO, has paid insufficient attention to the problem of Black Sea security. NATO, including the US, have taken strong measures to promote security in the Baltic Sea. We've seen nothing comparable in the Black Sea. This is a policy failure. And in fact, you had that embarrassing incident early in the Biden years when his pressures ramped up, Russian pressures in the Black Sea ramped up. We sent a destroyer which seemed to be heading into the Black Sea, and then just turned around before passing through the straits. The British, to their praise, did send their destroyer to cruise in the Black Sea. So we have not paid enough attention to this. And frankly, the US response when Russia tried to blockade imports and exports out of Ukraine's Black Sea ports after the big invasion was decidedly weak. And only Ukrainian ingenuity fixed the problem, as their drones have sent the Russian Black Sea fleet either to the bottom of the Black Sea or cowering in Novorossiysk and other parts in the eastern Black Sea. So you now have free navigation, thanks to, again, Ukrainian naval ingenuity. There's a lot we could do in the Black Sea. There should be regular NATO ships there. We have an excellent partner in Romania on this issue, not such a good partner in Turkey or Bulgaria. Obviously, the Ukrainians would be delighted to see our presence in the Black Sea. And it would not be a bad thing if Ivanishvili saw American ships and British ships cruising even in the eastern Black Sea. Because he thinks Russia's winning, which demonstrates he's not very smart, besides being corrupt. So we should be doing a lot more there. As for Moldova, you are keen to join the EU. There's really no interest, politically pertinent interest in Moldova in being associated with European or transatlantic security institution. That's fine. But again, the work that the US, various European countries are doing to strengthen your domestic institutions to deal with Russian espionage, Russian bribery, Russian use of corruption is very important. And this I think, will continue. And were there to be a greater American and NATO presence in the Black Sea, that would certainly be to Moldova's advantage. Russian mines do wind up in territorial waters of NATO countries on the Black Sea and in your territorial waters. So helping to deal with that would be of great benefit to you. And we understand the domestic circumstances here and the geopolitics of Moldova's position, and we're quite comfortable with that. So we're not looking to become a security partner with you at this point in time.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We may continue. Please, we have here another question from the part of non-governmental organizations.
Dear Mr. Rector, distinguished guest, my name is Natalia Sterkula. I represent the Foreign Policy Association, and my question would be about the foreign policy factor, which is very broadly used in this election campaign. Of course, it's clear that it's important choice for our country, but at the same time, foreign policy factor is more broadly used than domestic factors and domestic political situation. It's something strange, and maybe it's one of the main changes that we have in this sense if we talk about the choice from the part of our citizens. And of course, factor of the war, it's also very broadly used in this election campaign. And my question is, how correctly, from a democratic point of view, is using of this factor in the parliamentary election campaigns? And what are the potential risks for a Black Sea region in this sense, and especially for national security of the Republic of Moldova? Thank you.
I didn't fully catch the question. So what is the impact, or what is the results of what in the parliamentary elections? Of what factor?
Factor of the war in Ukraine is broadly used in this election campaign with absolutely different explanation to our population. Why?
Okay. That's, again, a very good question. And of course, the question of Russia's aggression in Ukraine is discussed with very different points of view in Moldova, as it is in many places in Europe, and for that matter, globally. Because Moscow has been pushing a propaganda line that this war is a result of NATO's encroachment on Russia, NATO going closer to Russia's borders. And they have had some success persuading people around the world that that is the key issue. But there's a very serious problem with that argument. I was working on American policy towards Russia and Eurasia in the mid-1990s. And at that time, and I made this point quickly in my set remarks, Moscow's policies were in many ways positive. Yeltsin had certain, I don't want to overstate this, but he had certain democratic instincts. They were pushing for elections. They were moving on economic reform. They were seeking to cooperate with the United States and the West in various crises around the world. For example, Iraq. But there was one area where Moscow's policies, starting in 1991, were aggressive, backward-looking, retrograde. And that was their policies in the Nizhny Zarubiezh, right? Including right here in Moldova, including right here in Transnistria. In 1991 or 1995, you had to be a foreign policy nerd to know what a frozen conflict was. But everyone today knows what a frozen conflict is. And so Moscow's aggressive designs on the territory of the former Soviet Union were evident in 1991 and 1992. The reason why NATO enlarged in the mid to late 1990s was because Poland and Hungary, imagine Hungary then as opposed to Hungary now, and the Czech Republic noticed what the Kremlin was doing in Abkhazia, in Nagorno-Karabakh, in Transnistria. And they were afraid, correctly, they were afraid that this would be their future unless they joined NATO. This is the origin of NATO enlargement. When the Russian war on Ukraine is simply the logical culmination of a policy pushed in Moscow starting in 1991. And again, if you follow the narratives on the war, you know that Putin has argued that Crimea has been Russia's forever. Well, not forever, since the late 18th century. And if you go back to the late 18th century, what else was under Russian control? 2/3 of Poland. And you can be sure the Poles understood that back in the 90s as they were pushing towards NATO membership. That's why you have NATO enlargement. And if you are sitting in the Kremlin and are so obtuse to actually believe your own narrative, how do you explain the fact that as a result of Putin's large invasion of Ukraine, 2 long neutral countries wanted to join NATO and joined, right? Sweden and Finland were proud neutral powers for many decades. They understand that Putin's aims are aggressive. And the only real protection against that is NATO. Sadly, there has been weak political leadership in Washington, in Berlin, in Paris, and other major Western capitals regarding the issue of Ukraine joining NATO. So this is not on the table right now. Okay, we have to live in the real world. But again, the only reason this has become important is because Putin wants to restore Russian control of all these areas, and that includes Moldova. So there are people in Moldova, not just in Transnistria or Gagauzia, but even elsewhere, who take their lead from Russian media. If you do that, you're guaranteed to come up with wrong conclusions. So this battle is being fought right now in your elections. And it has greater, the Russian imperial narrative has greater influence here because of the tactics that are not, let's say, conducive to democratic life. I mean, the funding of parties so that they can win an election, the funding of people to go to the polls and vote the Russian way. But you are in the process as a nation of sorting this out. And you've done pretty well sorting this out over the past 10 or so years. Conceivably, you could face a setback later this month. I'd be a little surprised, not overwhelmingly surprised if that were to happen. But that's what's going on.
Thank you. Yes, I just want to make 2 extra points on the same matter. The first one is about the fact that, yes, you are all students in international relations, you know international law, you know the basis of the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence of the countries. It's the same thing, and it's an expression of sovereignty, the free choice of the solution of security and prosperity for a country. The idea is not that NATO enlarged and has done something, as it is presented, but it is about countries that decided that for their own security, they want to join NATO. It happened with my country and with the other post-Soviet countries. It happened with the 3 Baltic states, as you know, and it happened with Georgia at that time and Ukraine, who aimed at joining NATO. Okay, it wasn't possible at that time, the difference was broader, but you've seen the 2 neutral states, we already alluded to that, John already underlined that, Finland and Sweden. So it's a matter of choice, it's a matter of exercising the sovereignty of a state to freely choose which way you want to go. It doesn't imply the fact that a different state, former metropole in an empire, has the right of overseeing or has the right of blocking any sovereignty. We are not in Brezhnev's doctrine with the limited sovereignty anymore. Those countries, all of that have been recognized, but we see each day the relativization of that issue. And my second point goes with the foreign affairs used extensively versus internal affairs. We all know European Union integration is not foreign policy. It is first and foremost internal policy. It is about the reforms happening in the country itself to move ahead, to make it more modern, more adaptive, able to meet the competition of the common market and to succeed. And that is what is happening in this process of joining the European Union. So there are internal policies as well as, sure, external policies at stake. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kifo, for your insights. We see now the hands here. I will give the opportunity for a young man here. Please present yourself. And then we'll continue to another side. We'll move to another side.
Distinguished guests, Your Excellency, Mr. Herbst, my name is Kojuhar Vlad, and I represent the Association of Young Diplomats of Moldova. And I have a question regarding regional and transatlantic significance. So, given the high stakes of the 2025 elections, as you already mentioned, to what extent could Moldova's election outcomes influence European Union and NATO's strategic posture in the wider Black Sea region?
The short answer to your question, and again, another strong one, is that Moldova is not seen as a major player on Black Sea security, and I think your government would be happy to say that publicly if asked. So I'm not certain it will have a large impact on it, but certainly Moldova is a beneficiary of freedom to trade in the Black Sea without hindrance, the absence of war in the Black Sea. So it's your natural interest to want to see a pacified Black Sea. But again, the election here is important for security in Europe. That's why you had Macron and Tusk and others visiting here, Merz, not too long ago. They understand the stakes. That's why, again, the United States continued its efforts to help your own institutions deal with dishonorable Russian tactics as the election approaches, and why we are all hoping for a good outcome later this month.
Thank you. We continue with students. I hear the hands there. Young ladies, please.
Good afternoon, distinguished guest. I'm really glad to have you here. My name is Nadina. I'm a second year student at International Relations. And my question for you today is, what concrete reforms should Moldova prioritize after the elections to achieve both the rule of law, and EU integration? And how can Moldova avoid the democratic fatigue? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think that the single strongest path towards your democratic future, your prosperous future, is to complete the negotiations with the EU as quickly as possible for entry. The EU is an extraordinarily successful institution promoting integration and prosperity in Europe. And you are fortunate that they appreciate the value of Moldova becoming part of the EU. So that you take care of all the requirements. I know they're enormous. I know it's a very arduous application process, but the benefits will be real, and they will demand that you do things that will make it harder for bad actors to operate in your financial system, which has been a particular problem here. And it will also open to your industry and to your agriculture one of the world's biggest markets. And many, many positive things will happen here in terms of growth once you become a member. So that's easily the answer to your question. Now, there are other things that can be done, also important to address specific weaknesses in your institutions. And you're doing that now on a bilateral basis with not just the United States, but other Western countries. But the big apple is getting that EU membership. And you're on a path towards it. What's unfortunate in the upcoming election is that the bad guys, the guys who want to return you to a quasi-Soviet past, understand that the EU is a popular idea amongst your population. So they present themselves Trojan horse style as being for joining the EU, even though their intention is, along with their backers in Moscow, to throw up impediments if they become more powerful as a result of the election.
I see the hand here. Young man, please.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Good afternoon, speakers and students and professor. My name is Nikita. I'm the chief of International Relations Group, first-year students. So, and my question is, even that fact that such NATO countries as Poland are under attack, which concrete measures can Moldova take to strengthen its security with limited resources and outside the NATO-EU umbrella? Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys specialize in good questions. I think we've seen serious efforts here to deal with security problems related to Kremlin policy. And again, I mentioned already efforts to strengthen your power ministries, your intelligence services against Russian penetration. Moldova is a small country, does not have a large armed forces, but there has been some efforts to make sure to maintain the integrity and increase the capability of your armed forces. You faced a specific problem of Russian troops or Russian-controlled troops in Transnistria. You've been protected, again, by the fact you don't share a border with Russia, that the large country in between you and Russia is fighting valiantly for its own existence as an independent state. And your unwillingness to help Moscow as it conducts that war is a real plus. That's something that I am confident will continue. You benefit as well from close relations with Romania, which has a very clear-eyed view of the Russian danger. And I think that's another area of bilateral cooperation that's very important for you.
I see plenty of questions here. Please send the microphone for lady.
My name is Sofia. I'm the second-year student at the Faculty of International Relations, and thank you that you gave us the opportunity to discuss with you. And my questions is following. Could the US aid freeze create openings for Russia or other external actors, China or other countries, to increase influence in Moldova or in neighboring Black Sea states? Thank you.
I mentioned already, and this is important, that the cooperation that began many years ago, strengthening your domestic institutions against Russian espionage, Russian blandishment, Russian bribery, continue under President Trump. I know that there were bad actors internationally, not just in Moscow, but also in Budapest and in Tbilisi, that were expecting a change in their favor when Trump won, and that has not happened. Although we did see, I would say, some questionable, at least, statements. So this was actually before the president, that Trump's team came into office, regarding the election last year in Romania. Questions were raised that were not positive. But that has not been a factor once they've come into power, as best I can see. Although my colleagues here might have a better sense of that than I do. Again, we have, President Trump and his team have done some problematic things that relate to your question. as a former U.S. diplomat for 31 years and a proud and patriotic American, let's just say I was not pleased when on several occasions in the UN, the United States was voting with Russia and China and Belarus and Nicaragua. That cut against virtually every tradition in American foreign policy and did not strengthen American security. I hope we will not see that again, but I can tell you with confidence that it will not happen again. But even as that happened again, our sound policies vis-a-vis Moldova, vis-a-vis Georgia, have not changed with the new administration. And they've already been in office now for 8 months. Yeah, 8 months. And I don't think they will change. And thank goodness for that.
Okay, thank you. We continue. I think that we will take a question from the third part of the classroom. Is this possible? Lady on the second. Yes, stage. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I will let myself to speak from all the faculty. Big gratitude for our visit today at our university. And my question will be addressed to Mix Alex Sharban. In the context of your experience, given the difference between the Romanian and Moldovan context, which parts of the Romanian transition experiential Moldova adapt and which should it avoid? Thank you.
It almost seems like so many years ago in 2000 that Romania was passing through the transition and to the accession to NATO and to the European Union. I think the lessons during that time that were accumulated were very useful because obviously our country joined both institutions. We also, across the many years, found a role, a voice, and a challenging position to be a member in these institutions and to find yourself as a country to contribute to security within NATO and to contribute as a member of the European Union. It takes a lot of effort from the political class, from diplomats, from military, and from society to find a voice and to find your role in these institutions. And I think today even more as these institutions are challenged, both internally and by the external environment, remaining a active, a faithful, a strong member, not deciding to vote to exit or to doubt, but to really challenge the institutions by contributing. I think that is what being a member of the European Union and NATO is about. But that is a perspective from one country. I think that's a good question to put to many other countries that are going through challenges and difficulties in these institutions.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests. Thank you for your presence here. I am Stelian, a second-year student at the Specialty of International Relations, and my question is for Mr. Chifu. The security of the Black Sea is often discussed, but in practice, NATO and the EU appear reactive rather than proactive. Isn't the unsettling truth that the key doors to European stability remain unsecured? Thank you.
Okay. Well, you were alluding to the fact that NATO does not take very good care. But look, 3 NATO countries, Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey, has established their own mission for demining. Everything that is linked to security in the Black Sea is also linked to the security of those 3 countries, littoral countries. And it's normal to get together and to try to assess and to fight all those types of threat that are presented to those three countries. NATO per se is also involved, but as you know, during war times, according to Montreux Convention 1936, the entrance of vessels from outside the area has been blocked by Turkey, who feel that such an input could alter or aggravate the defense situation and security situation in the Black Sea. On one hand, yes, we do not have anymore the NATO missions for reassuring allies and partners, as we have seen previously before the launch of the war, but at the same time, don't forget that it was the same thing for Russian vessels who couldn't enter the straits, and that means that they are obliged to use only what they have as a Black Sea fleet inside the area of the Black Sea, and a little bit because there is this channel on Volga moving some ships from the Caspian Sea to the Black Sea. But actually, it shrank the possibility, and that's why maybe together with the drones, the inventivity, and all the other findings of the Ukrainians, they succeed in practically controlling the area of the Black Sea, and that the Black Sea fleet is no longer in Sevastopol for some times already, but to Novorossiysk. And even in Novorossiysk, from time to time, they do face, how should I put it, surprises. So it is a concern, but we have to look at NATO not only as a very rigid organization. NATO is also the member countries. Don't forget Article 3 is before Article 5. Article 3 means that the first responder to any security defense threat is the country itself. So we need first to take care ourselves of the security and then team together with our allies and deal with the threats that are passing our capacity to be defended. So that would be my answer. The same with the EU. Yes, EU lacked a lot of time to be involved in the area. We did have Black Sea Synergy, who was referring more to the BSEC in the original papers, but now EU itself came back in the Black Sea, and Romania is in the forefront to taking over an important role inside the EU for dealing with the security that one's in the Black Sea. And EU is interested, and it's naturally interested because there are a number of projects. We have a cable of energy coming, green energy coming from Azerbaijan via Georgia and on the bed of the Black Sea to Romania and further to the EU. We do have the same cable and project of cable for data that is going to do the same thing. There's a number of other projects which are involving our strategic partner, I mean, from Romania point of view, and also strategic partner for the EU, at least in migration issues, which is Turkey, which is very important as well for the security and defense of Europe.
Thank you very much. We may continue. As I promised, we will take a question from this part, please.
Thank you for your presence, Mr. Ambassador. And given that the Republic of Moldova is located in a region that Russia regards as its sphere of influence, Moscow would likely attempt to interfere in Moldova's upcoming parliamentary election. And there is a non-zero probability that Russian opposition could win through electoral fraud. If that were to happen, what specific measures would United States and European Union take to alter the balance of power in Moldova? That's all.
I will repeat this because it's important. If in fact the opposition parties win, and it is not proved that they won by illicit means, then we need to acknowledge their victory and express a willingness to cooperate with them. Now, that's not a cooperation designed to make it easier for Moscow to gobble up Moldova. or for Moscow to increase its influence in Moldova. That'll be cooperation designed to try to persuade them that maybe cooperation with an aggressive power is not in the interest of either Moldova or their own party. So it's not for the United States to choose who is in control in Chișinău, just as it's not for Russia to make that. And I don't think we can pursue such a policy. But we can pursue a principled policy working with the duly elected government of Moldova, whichever it is, to pursue projects that are good for Moldova, good for the United States, good for our European allies and partners.
Thank you very much. We have time only for the last question, and then we continue with the final remarks of our panelists and the rector of the university. If it's possible, young lady in coat.
My name is Eva Martinenko. I am a first-year student at the Faculty of International Relations. And my question is, how realistic is it that the result of 2025 election in Moldova will influence the speed of its EU accession talks? Thank you.
That's pretty clear-cut. There's no question that Ms. Sandu and her party want to join the EU as quickly as possible. So if they win the parliamentary elections, that will make it easier for Moldova to pass the legislation that the EU requires for entrance. If the opposition parties win the election, they face a very interesting question, maybe even a difficult question, because not all of them, but some of them have postured in a way suggesting they want to see EU membership. If once they're in office, reflecting the interests of those who are paying their bills, meaning the Russians, they pursue policies designed to block progress, then it would be incumbent on the Reform Party to make that very clear publicly so that the citizens of Moldova see it. Because there's no question, Moldova wants to become a free society. It wants to become a prosperous place. And not joining the EU is a way to make sure those things do not happen.
Thank you very much. I think right now young generation understands more and more the importance of their vote and presence at the electoral parliamentary elections. All of us understand that the future of Republic of Moldova is in European Union, and we already established the course of foreign policy, European integration. I think right now I may pass the floor to our panelists, Mr. Șerban, Mr. Chifu, for the final remarks. Would you like to make a generalization, to say something additionally? Mr. Chifu, please.
Well, I will try to be very brief. Actually, it's the real thing, and that's how democracy works. It's really up to you, to each and every one of you, to every vote, to decide which way you want to go. For sure, countries around you, democratic countries, are looking with hope that you are making a choice that would maintain your course in the same direction, in the European direction, in the democracy direction, and for sure, we are looking with high concern to some other actors who are, for instance, praising the fact that they are going to call for Russian forces to come in Republic of Moldova to enforce and defend those types of forces if arriving in the power, or to absorb the so-called debt that the separatists in Transnistria have been made to Gazprom, and to assume it at the level of the state of Republic of Moldova. These are concerns that should be concerns for each and every citizens, but for sure there are concerns because they are reversing actually the track towards sovereignty, manifest sovereignty of the Republic of Moldova, creating extra dependencies and actually tightening you to the former empire and to the new empire to be built at least in the level of ambition of Putin in the Kremlin. That would be my conclusion. So it's up to you, it's up to your activities, it's up to the fact of convincing your friends, your relatives to go to vote first and foremost. Abstention or neutrality in such a crucial existential vote is not an option. So I'm quite sure that at least at this level of the Faculty of International Relations, Political Sciences, there is this conscience that a decision should be made and that it's about your life, especially when you are young and the future of this country is specially designed to you. Thank you.
I personally 100% agree with Mr. Kifu. The future of our country is in your hands. Thank you very much. And we may continue. Mr. Rector, please, final remarks.
Dragi profesori, dragi studenți, onorată asistență, ce pot să vă spun? Profesorii pot să mândrească, cred, cu munca care o depun, mândră de dumneavoastră, mândră de studenții noștri. Am văzut cel puțin încă 10 mâini care au rămas respectiv de cu nerăspunsuri la întrebările de dumneavoastră și vă mulțumesc mult pentru această participare, pentru întrebările care le-ați dat și îmi permit acum să, în numele dumneavoastră, să-l aplaudăm cu toții pe domnul ambasador Herbst, pe domnul Iulian Chifu și pe domnul Alexei Mateevici și să ne mulțumim pentru faptul că au fost alături, în egală măsură ca și oaspeților noștri care au fost la acest eveniment și au participat activ la acesta. Vă mulțumesc!
Vă mulțumim frumos. Cred că pe această notă noi finisăm discuțiile de astăzi. Cum a menționat domnul rector de la început, domnul decan nu este cu noi, dar cu suflet el este aici. Vă mulțumim toți. Thank you very much for all the participation. If it's possible to make a common picture, family picture, dear guests, if it's possible to come in front of the audience. Yes, we have this kind of experience.